move that City Council approves the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting, March 22nd, 2021.
Moved by Councillor Lonsdale. Any errors or omissions? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Item 3B, regular council meeting minutes of March 22nd, 2021.
I move that City Council approves the regular council meeting minutes of March 22nd, 2021.
Moved by Councillor Lonsdale. Any errors or omissions? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. And just an update now that my mic is on, we have an amended agenda of 6A being Centennial Park, 6B temporary patios, and 6C notice of motion. Item 4A, we have Citizen of the Month for April 2021. And so this report here recognizes Henry Sawicki as the April 2021 Citizen of the Month. Henry was nominated by Jerry Richards, who shared the following information in the nomination paper. Henry, along with his wife, Irmgard, immigrated to Canada in 1953. He arrived in Wetaskiwin on April 14, 1953, and his wife-to-be followed in December. Henry was trained as an engineer technician specializing in farm equipment design. He co-established and operated Alberta Engineering, later Alteen Distributors in Wetaskiwin, a distributor of farm equipment, machinery, and recreational equipment to dealerships in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Henry's professional service and genuine respectful approach earned him the trust and esteem of clients and the community for over 60 years. And throughout the years, Henry's contributions to the city of Wetaskiwin were through the Sacred Heart Church, through the Wetaskiwin Separate School District, through the Kiwanis Club of Wetaskiwin, the Wetaskiwin Chamber of Commerce, and the Wetaskiwin Music Festival. Oh, and a little bit further, laid the groundwork which brought the festival to Wetaskiwin and this music festival, and served on the organizing committee for decades with the Wetaskiwin and District Heritage Museum. He's a tireless supporter and promoter of the museum, and he served on executive for decades. And throughout the years, with his time in and around Wetaskiwin, donated faithfully and generously to many local charities and organizations. So on behalf of the city of Wetaskiwin, I would like to recognize, thank, and congratulate Henry Sawicki on being Citizen of the Month for April 2021. Yeah, Henry, is there anything that you'd like to add? Anything I forgot?
Hello, just want to make sure, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name's Norman. My dad, Henry, sitting beside me, has just asked me to say a few words on his behalf, very few words. Thank you very much for this honor. He's of course very pleased, and as is his nature, he's also very humbled. When I first told him about the award, his response was, well, I haven't really done very much. And so I went on to list all of the contributions that he made over his lifetime to the city of Wetaskiwin. And of course, he was still humble about it. But it's wonderful to see that people that have made significant contributions to the city of Wetaskiwin, the development of the city, from the present and also the past are recognized. It's wonderful to see that the city values its history so much to remember those that have made contributions to the development of the city in the past. And Wetaskiwin's always been his life here. I mean, when he first came to Canada the very first time in 1952, it was on a business trip. And this business trip started in Ontario, and he made his way westward across Canada. And he visited many places in Ontario and Manitoba and Saskatchewan and Alberta. But it was Wetaskiwin that he chose to make his home. It was Wetaskiwin that he chose to start a business. And it was in Wetaskiwin that he chose to raise a family. And so it's no accident that he's here. And even in his late years of his life, he chooses to stay here in Wetaskiwin.
I was 24 when I came.
You were 24, yeah. So it means a lot to him. This community means a lot to him. And I just want to say thank you very much on his behalf.
Yeah, that's right.
Anything else you want to say, Dad?
Well, I'm pleased to be here.
He's pleased to be here.
Yeah,
We're very pleased to have you, Henry. Thank you so much for all of your contributions to the city of Wetaskiwin and all of the organizations and groups that you helped support for over 60 years. It's amazing the work that you've done. And I think Wetaskiwin is a great city because of people like you who give tirelessly. And for those who think that they haven't done much over the 60 years, and to have a resume like that is absolutely incredible. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. And just because you're Citizen of the Month, you don't have to stay on for the entirety of our council meeting. They're not always exciting, so don't feel guilty if you guys cut out a little bit early. Item 5A, bylaw 1991-21 to redistrict plan 8820-8890, block 1, lot 26, 5610 45th Avenue from C3 highway commercial to M2 heavy industrial.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is an application that we received to redistrict this piece of land. I will just highlight, ultimately, administration's recommendation is for refusal or non-support of this application. And just so council is aware, we have discussed the details of this with the applicant, and they wanted to push it forward anyways to see what council's decision might be. So with that, I will jump into our land use planning report here. So the basis of this application is to rezone this piece of property. It sits right behind the existing Patios pawn shop. And so the applicant wants to use it basically as additional storage for the pawn shop, to extend the pawn shop use back there. So the current zoning of C3 highway commercial does not allow for that pawn shop use. And so the application is to rezone it to M2, which is heavy industrial, which is the only district in which pawn shop use is allowed. And so ultimately, as far as land use is concerned, administration recommends that this application not be supported because M2, heavy industrial, isn't an appropriate zoning for that location. And a little bit of our analysis. So the site is located here at the intersection of 45th Ave and 57th Street. It's currently vacant, and it has been for as far as our records show. So it is waiting to be developed into something. The nearby land uses are C2 generally, which is general commercial. And then there is also Kitty Corner. There is parcel zoned RMX, which is residential mixed use. And then right across from the nearest C2 parcels is residential estate district houses. So the current zoning is C3, which is highway commercial. It's within the highway commercial kind of area. The current use, it's vacant. There are some site photos there. And it does back onto the existing Poncho's Pond area. So the purpose of the M2 district, so this is what the proposed district would be. So the purpose is for manufacturing, processing, assembly, distribution, service and repair uses. Any nuisance associated with such permitted uses should not generally extend beyond the boundaries of the zoning classification. And the zoning classification also allows for other industrial uses as discretionary uses. And so some of those are the more intensive industrial uses, such as factories, that kind of thing that could emit noise, odor, risk of toxic emissions, and those kinds of things. So that is the intent of the M2 district. There's a quick list there comparing the uses that would be allowed in the M2 if it were zoned that compared to the existing highway commercial. So there are some overlapping uses there, but pawn shop isn't one of them, and so it would need to be rezoned, or the land use bylaw would need to be amended in order for pawn shop use to be allowed here. And I will just highlight that there are some uses that are quite different. So there are those higher risk industrial uses that are discretionary. So we would have the option to refuse those if that application came through. But having this parcel zoned that way would open it up, if ownership changed or something like that, then we would be open to the potential for those uses to be located there. The permitted uses, so there are permitted uses include industrial buildings, recycling depots, those kinds of things, and those are permitted uses, so we wouldn't actually be allowed to refuse them. So it'd be a rubber stamp approval. So rezoning this land to that type of use does have that kind of land use impact. As far as zoning compatibility, so this is out of the municipal development plan, which highlights, or it outlines, I should say, land use compatibility. So in theory, this chart shows that these uses should at least be buffered. So the B represents buffer zone, X represents not compatible, C represents compatible. So the M2 there outlined in red compared to the adjacent land uses. So we have RMX, which is kitty corner. So technically, according to the MGA, even though there is a road there, that RMX parcel is still adjacent. The definition of adjacent in the MGA says next to, if not for a road, and I believe water bodies are involved, and easements and train tracks and that kind of thing. So it is adjacent, and so it is applicable. And so considering that the M2 use is identified as not compatible with the RMX use in the MDP, this application actually is not compliant with the MDP. So for that reason, we actually can't recommend approval of this application. In addition, there are regulations related to pawn shop use. So this is thinking a little further down the road as far as process. So if this were to be rezoned to M2, the applicant would still need to apply for a development permit for the pawn shop use. And the regulations for pawn shop use include buffer separation distance of 200 meters from any residential zone. And in this case, that RMX property is residential use, and it's about 50 meters away. So much closer than the separation distance in the regulations. And on sites where pawn shops are developed, that site shall not have outdoor storage. And in the recommendation, or in the proposed use here, the proposed use is for outdoor storage. So again, those aren't game changers, and we could issue a development permit. We'd probably require that the entire parcel be enclosed rather than having outdoor storage. But again, just because the location is not movable, we would need to provide a variance of that 200-meter separation distance. So based on the actual land use regulations in the bylaw, that indicates to the planning department at least that this lot probably isn't appropriate for that type of use. So all of that being said, I will highlight that the motion is written in the affirmative because procedurally that's the way it is. But I will reiterate that administration does not recommend approval of this, primarily due to non-compliance with the municipal development plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I will open it up to questions for clarification before we move forward, and then we can make a motion as per council's wishes. Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you, Worship. Andrew, I guess the problem I'm wrestling with here, and maybe it's a historical issue. You know, the highway commercial, saying it's not zoned highway commercial or pawn shop is not eligible for highway commercial. And yet we have two pawn shops that are both sitting smack dab in the middle of highway commercial. And one of them even goes so far as to have outside storage, which according to this is not allowed. So how is it we have two properties that are not compliant with highway commercial that sit smack dab in highway commercial?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, this you are correct. We do have those. I haven't looked into all of them yet. A little background on this one in particular, the development permit was issued, I believe, in 2004, I think. And it wasn't allowed there either. And it was initially approved, or sorry, it was refused by the development authority and it got appealed. So the applicant appealed it and the SDAB overturned the refusal. And so that's why that one was permitted. As far as the other ones in town, I haven't dug into the approval situation there. Could have been similar situations, or it could have been that they were just a long time ago and it used to be allowed and now it's not. So it's a valid consideration, but in terms of my analysis right now, I'm only looking at what are the rules right now and how do we move forward.
And further on that property, there is a storage container. Is that on property or is that container on the existing pawn shop? Maybe. Is that container on the existing pawn shop property or is it on the property that's in question here today?
It's on the existing pawn shop property.
Thank you.
Councillor Bronco.
Thank you, Tyler. The chair to Andrew. Andrew, a lot of alarm bells come up to me on this issue. Not because of a pawn shop, but we're not allowed pawn shops to go. We know in the Tasman area there will be no more pawn shops due to the locations and through residential churches and schools and all that. But that property right now sits blank. Just a hypothetical question. You don't want it to be a storage lot, correct? For the pawn shop, but is the pawn shop buying or is it a different identity of a company buying that property?
To clarify the storage issue, so the storage is just a regulation for pawn shop use. So if there was an application for a pawn shop, outdoor storage can't be part of that use. That being said, outdoor storage is a separate use. So you could apply for an outdoor storage application, development permit application, and you could have outdoor storage there, but not associated with pawn shop.
So,
That's not what you're asking.
no, I'm asking is if, let's say Relcom wanted to buy that property, he could use that as storage.
I see. Yep. Yep, that's
And
correct.
so Mr. Denham could store his cars and everything. So basically, we made a bylaw to get rid of that container. So nobody can build anything to replace those containers because you don't want to storage for containers. If you want to take that container and put a building on there to store his stuff, it would be refused, correct? Because it's a storage building.
So if the pawn shop use was going to be developed, we probably would require that it be within an enclosed building. Yeah.
Kind of confusing me, but if somebody buys, he's trying to buy the land to store whatever vehicles, probably what it's going to go out there, because otherwise he ain't going to build the building and close it. So we're only looking at that facility as either for vehicles or trailers that he's taken on trade, correct? Because he's not going to put a building there because we're going to refuse it.
Through the chair, yeah. If the current owner was going to use it for outdoor storage, like in association with their business, then yep, that would be allowed. The difficulty with this application is that it's for pawn shop use. And so it's a different use than outdoor storage. But it's a regulation under the pawn shop use that they can't store things outdoors,
So
if that maybe clarifies it.
let me ask you a hypothetical question. That owner of that building decided to buy a piece of property in somewhere else in Wetaskiwin to store his stuff. Can he do it? Other than in that location?
Through the chair, the pawn shop, you mean, if they could store things in other
Somewhere,
locations?
some other location in Wetaskiwin. Let's say he wanted to go, hypothetical question. Oh, what place I'm looking at, say Cobra's yard there across from. If they were to, can they store their equipment there?
Yeah, so through the chair, they could, if it was in an M2 heavy industrial zone.
It's the same zoning as what we got there now.
No, this is zoned H3 or C3 highway commercial.
It's the same street. 57th Street down at the Andy side, isn't that the same zoning?
I believe there isn't any M2 zoning on that stretch.
Not zoning, empty lot on that section. 53rd Street across from Timmy's, 57th Street all the way down, you come across Timmy's across the street, isn't that the same zoning?
I believe through the chair that one is zoned highway commercial as well. Let me just pull it up though.
You're talking about Pullman. No, I'm talking about Cobra's. Yeah. Yeah, it's on the same street. That's Pullman's still on. Cobra behind. No, Cobra bought the front. Yeah, that's.
So through the chair, I believe the one that Cobra is going on is zoned general commercial, that's C2.
Thank you.
Councilor Billingsley.
Andrew, through the chair, so they're looking to do storage only on this property and not conduct retail business on this property, is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. The difficulty is how do we as a development department differentiate that? And if they are, essentially it comes down to how do we ensure that they don't take customers back there. It becomes an enforcement issue, really. So if you're asking whether they could apply for it as just outdoor storage, they could, but the real intent obviously is to expand the pawn shop use. So that's what we're trying to tackle.
So are they looking to build a building on this property?
No, through the chair, as far as they have discussed their proposal with me, it was just that they want to fence it and have it as a security fenced storage lot.
And with the land use bylaw, would they be allowed one seat can on that property? And that
Yes, through the chair, I believe that based on the size, it would only be allowed to have one on it.
thank you.
Andrew, if that came back to us as a proposal for DC, and we then announce, or not announce, I just read something on my iPad. We then decide what it was that's going in on that piece of land. It's coming back to council anyways. If the intent of it is for pure storage only for the business, it would be no different than the current owner having it and using it as storage right now. Other than we don't have the ability to police whether or not they're selling from that place behind the building. And their intention isn't to build something back there to act as another storefront for the business.
Yes, that's correct. I guess the difference there would be that direct control would all be up to council. So there's no, the difficulty with the M2 is that it opens it up to many other uses being allowed that maybe shouldn't be allowed there. And so the DC would be nice, as in it would be up to council to decide, just one use, i.e. that outdoor storage would be allowed there. Yeah.
Then if the ownership changed on that, that DC no longer applies to anybody else that comes in there. They still have to apply for a change there.
Yeah, they could continue the same use there if ownership changed, but if they wanted to change the use, then you're right, it would have to be a change of use that would go through council.
And were they open to a DC and coming back to council with what they wanted?
We didn't talk about that, but it is an option. My own thought is I would like to minimize the number of DC applications we do get, but it's an option that we could look at for here if council would like to do that.
In your opinion, then, if you do not want to see it as an M2, but allowing a business to have a little bit of expansion, using the land that could be used as storage for just about any other commercial business other than a pawn shop, all we're doing is allowing for storage for a business that isn't necessarily falling under that C3 designation. So, and I agree with you, I don't want to have everybody coming back to council, so we're one-offing a bunch of zoning permits through DC, but I think something that we're not changing the use of the land, we're changing the use of who's being able to use it and trying to be business friendly at the same time.
Yep, and that's fair.
Well,
Then my next considerations would just be at the development permit stage. We might need to look at some additional conditions of the permit.
Absolutely. So I would support DC going forward and then leaving it up to administration to have that. Anyone else? Councillor Hillgartner?
No, I'm still not in favor. Once we start changing the zoning and all this stuff, we'll probably be doing it all down the whole highway line. That's all part of our C3 zoning, and that should stay in C3 zoning. And it's just really too bad that, pawn shop, he can't expand it. But, I don't want to see us changing it just for this purpose.
Councillor Brown?
That pawn shop, he does not own that land, he just rents it.
He doesn't even use that.
I know, but it's owned by the Denham Holdings. He doesn't own the property where he's building, his lease is up to be up to go, but all he's doing is storing, the guys across the street, or anybody you can buy and store the same kind of vehicle there, so is that being prejudiced? And we can't do anything if he builds there. I'm sorry, we can do if he decides to build it. But to store a car there, what difference is if he stores that vehicle there, if he goes somewhere else in town to go store that car or trailer and they come and get it?
But Councillor Branco, then we're bending the rules that we have in place for zoning, and pawn shops are supposed to be zoned in M2. But so are we going to change? Are we going to change all of our bylaws now?
No, but if the guy had a holding company, he could buy that and not use it as a pawn shop.
But through a loophole, he got in there. By rights, the pawn shop shouldn't be on that commercial zone.
So agree with you. If he appeals that and it goes to the appeal board, we have no say. The appeal board gives him approval, we have no say now. Correct?
So through the chair, under the Municipal Government Act, a development permit getting appealed to the SDAB, the SDAB actually can't vary the use regulations either under the Municipal Government Act. So the development officer can't provide a variance for a use that's not allowed. And the SDAB actually is bound by that same rule. They can't actually provide a variance. They can't overturn it and allow a use that's not allowed under the land use bylaw. So I actually don't think an SDAB could allow that use there if it's not allowed, if it's not zoned properly under the land use bylaw.
Counselor Nielsen.
Through the chair, but to me, there's a discrepancy in that argument in the sense that obviously they appealed the original placement of their business being in a C3, and SDAB overturned the city's restrictions and allowed it to occur. So I'm a little uncertain that if they can actually put the pawn shop into a C3 on 56th Street, why they couldn't overturn the C3 on the backside of that property as well.
Yeah, so through the chair, you're exactly right. And there is the potential that they did approve this when they weren't allowed to under the MGA, but I didn't look into it. It's also possible that maybe it was allowed back then. I haven't looked into the
Yeah.
history of it. So you're correct, but I haven't looked into that.
But I guess my final comment would be, I agree with Councillor Hillgardner. It's as much as we can say Joe Blow could rent that space and put 15 vehicles in storage there because Joe Blow is not a pawn shop owner. To have pawn shop owner put the same vehicles on there is not allowed. But I also think that flies in the face of why we have zoning restrictions in the first place in terms of what we want our community to look like and how we want it to be used. So I'm with Councillor Hillgardner on this one.
Anyone else?
So for clarification, what are we voting on? Yes, no?
Nothing.
Okay.
No motion has been made.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe Sue, if an agenda item is up without a motion being made, does there have to be a motion made to move on to the next agenda item? Or if no motion is made, do we accept as information?
Yeah, you can accept this as information. You can kill it. You could do first reading and then within 2 years, we would have to bring back more information. But yeah, there is the opportunity to defeat the motion that's on the table and then it dies.
So, but technically there isn't a motion on the table.
Oh, right.
So I would say, I think in order to have a clear understanding from council, there should be a motion made, and then whether it's approved or defeated, that's how we carry forward.
If I could suggest to the chair, you could approve first reading and direct administration to amend the bylaw to rezone it to DC, if that's the way council would like to go. And then we can take it forward for second reading with that amendment to the bylaw.
That is the second alternate option as well.
We could just make a motion to direct administration with first reading to go to DC, not necessarily amending the motion, right? Because there isn't a motion on the floor right now.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the only change in the motion, if that was the way that council wanted to go, was changing from C3 highway commercial to DC direct control, if that was the will of council. Nope.
Other way, Karen.
Yeah. From C3. Nope, where you are right now, like where the cursor is. Yeah, from C3. And then you would, if council wanted, you could change the M2 to DC.
Right.
But I don't know if that's the will of council. But I would suggest we put a motion on the floor so we can at least debate and vote it. Councillor Nielsen.
I agree. It needs to be on the floor. So I move that council gives first reading to bylaw 1991-21 to amend the City of Wetaskiwin Land Use Bylaw 1804-13 to redistrict plan 8820890 block 1 lot 26 5610 45th Avenue from C3 highway commercial to M2 heavy industrial.
Moved by Councillor Nielsen. Any discussion? I would make an amendment to change M2 to DC.
Yeah.
Discussion on the amendment. So this is just to the amendments, not to the motion on the floor, just changing M2 to DC. Councilor Nielsen?
I understand the rationale for it, but I also agree with the I guess the comments that Andrew has presented is that I don't want to get caught in the cycle where whenever we have a discussion going forward and we may not quite, it may not fit into a zoning restriction, we jump to DC as a way to circumvent the planning that's put in place. So I would speak against that amendment.
Okay, Councilor Billingsley?
No, Councilor Nielsen answered my concern.
Anyone else? To the amendment, those in favor? Opposed? Defeated. Back to the motion on the floor. Anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Opposed? Defeated. Unanimously. Item 5B, bylaw 1992-21 to redistrict plan M3 Block 11, Lot 1 to 3, 4816 50th Avenue from DDO Downtown District Overlay to C2 General Commercial District.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is our second redistricting application of the day. So this application comes to us because similar situation, a proposed use is not allowed in the current district. And so we identified that C2 would be the most appropriate alternative district for this land. The proposed use is it's an automotive tinting and decal shop, basically a paint shop, which actually doesn't quite fit under any of the land uses in the land use bylaw. But it would fit best under automotive repair uses. So our considerations here are that this land is within essentially the downtown district, and that's why it's zoned DDO. The redistricting application has been brought forward by the landowner. They began operating their glass tinting operation and realized that it was not an allowed use. And so we approached them beginning the enforcement process. And so this was a result of that. Ultimately, the land use options there were C1 or C2. So there's the similar comparison list there. In this case, a lot of the uses are quite similar between the DDO and C2 uses. There are a few more automotive type uses that would be allowed in this location. But in this case, administration is satisfied that this is an okay spot for that. The use itself would be contained entirely within the building since it's a zero lot line building. So there's no outdoor storage. There wouldn't be any noise or other pollutants and that kind of thing. And the nature of the business actually, though it does relate to vehicles, it is essentially body work tinting only. So there's no oils or anything that are free moving or leaking or anything like that. And so the use itself is not very intensive. Ultimately, as we do the same comparison to the municipal development plan, we see that the main street will continue to be developed as a mixed use area and will continue to grow and take advantage of existing infrastructure. So in administration's opinion, the proposed business here does fit within the existing building and is an appropriate use and wouldn't have negative impacts on the adjacent uses. And the zoning compatibility chart does show that the C1 district requires a buffer between the C2 district. Unfortunately, the chart doesn't include the DDO district there, so we're left to analyze the proposed use itself. And considering that the use is entirely encapsulated within the building, that is a buffer in itself. That is all of the analysis summarized quickly. Are there any questions?
Entertain a motion and then we'll get into questions. Councillor Hilgertner.
I move that the city council gives first reading to bylaw 1992-21 to amend the city of Wetaskiwin land use bylaw 1804-13 to district plan M3 block 11 lot 1-3 48 16th 50th Avenue from DDO downtown district overlay to C2 general commercial district use.
Moved by Councillor Hilgertner. Councillor Bronco.
Thank you. How did this happen? We have a building, was bought by Jamel, operating since Christmas. We find out now it's not rezoned for the right. How did he get a business license?
Well, this is through the chair. As we discussed, our enforcement options are basically complaint based. And so this was brought to development's attention. I believe it was from bylaw who asked it was actually the fire department, sorry, who noticed that this business was operating there. We didn't know about it. And so they noted that they hadn't seen their plans or anything, and it could be a fire risk. And so, of course, before they get a development permit, they need to do the rezoning. And so that's the stage that we're at now.
So you didn't know. Everybody drives by his place to get to City Hall. Nobody knew that was operation. So if the other guy would have bought the prior to, no, forget it. I'm just going to use my. Anyways.
Councillor Lonsdale.
Thank you. Through the chair to Andrew. I guess just a clarification, Andrew. This gentleman has been in business for a little while now. If this wasn't passed today, we're effectively putting this gentleman out of business in that location.
Through the chair, that's correct. However, I mean, the correct process would have been to pursue a permit in the first place before opening up. And so at that point, we would have been able to identify other appropriate locations that were already zoned that way. So that's how it would have gone.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah,
Councillor Nielsen.
thank you. I'm missing something in this conversation because as I understand, he currently works with the same product. He's simply looking at now adding an element to his inventory in terms of tinting. Is that not right?
No. He's operating there, not following the land use bylaw. The zoning doesn't permit the work that he's doing there.
Okay. But he deals with glass. And he deals with glass and he's talking about,
No.
you're saying no?
So they're set up there without proper zoning. They didn't get a development permit. The steps on their part weren't taken. And then it was found out that they're operating in this business without having a development permit done. And now we're going backwards to change the zoning to make it appropriate for them to operate in that building. It was their misstep for not getting this done prior to them
Doing the
opening.
work.
Yeah.
It's a car care facility. He's cleaning cars and tinting.
I'm sorry, Joe?
It's a car. He's cleaning cars and tinting.
So as I read this, Andrew, this company basically, they sell tinting and they do detailing. This will be done inside the shop. No mechanics or anything like that. It's basically cosmetic. deckling and tinting of windows that they're doing to the automobiles and basically polish and clean them and so forth?
Through the chair, that's correct. Yeah. And we would, when we issue, if we issue a development permit, when we get to that stage, we would certainly be adding conditions to ensure that this use remains very unobtrusive.
And so basically, they have taken an older building that happens to be on Main Street, improved the looks of it, and, you know, adding a business to downtown, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
So then I would have, to Councillor Hillgartner's argument, I'm assuming for the change in zoning, is that they didn't follow procedure, but they're doing something good, or they're creating business in the area, so you'll support the change. But if we had a zoning change for a business to have storage that didn't fit one particular business, but would fit 15 others, that's not okay. I struggle with the rationale behind why it's okay one way, but not another way.
Well, because we're talking about two different types of zoning. We're talking
But
about,
we're changing a zoning to allow business someplace that started operating without having the proper permits and without having the proper permits in place. So now we're backtracking. To make something okay in an area that wasn't okay to be zoned that way.
it's true that they have done this backwards.
But we're changing a process, like we're changing a zoning to allow a business to be in there. But on the previous agenda item, that wasn't okay because 15 other businesses could do the exact same thing that one business is looking to do, but because they're not a permitted use in C3, then you would vote it down.
Well, this hasn't come to the floor yet to vote on.
No, I know, but you were just speaking in favor of it, of how.
Well, I'm just stating the facts, what the business is and so forth. And it did improve the looks of downtown or the buildings, so.
I'm just
stating the facts, that's all.
And just a point of order for Councilor Bronco, once staff had realized that they were operating without a development permit in place or properly in that area, it was dealt with. So taking a shot at staff saying that they drive by and they don't do anything about it. Not everybody who works at City Hall knows what processes are in place, or that they were a permitted or not permitted use in that area, or whether or not they got the development permit or not. Once they found out that it was operating while not permitted, they did something about it.
Maybe, I apologize for that, but 4 months of a business being there operating downtown.
Doesn't matter. Once they found out what it was, they did something about it. It wasn't like it's been there for years and years and years. So just caution when taking shots at staff. Councilor Nielsen.
Thank you. No, I think there's a difference in the comparators, and I think the difference is if you look at the existing zoning districts, we can see that we have the downtown commercial district all in the light yellow, and that whole area is, with the exception of 2 properties on that block, are all downtown commercial district. And I don't disagree that I think the gentleman or the business owner, either purposely or unintentionally, either way, has not done due diligence in establishing the business. However, I guess I'm just thinking out loud that if this would have come to us months ago, given this particular district overlay that we're looking at, would we have restricted it when the property that is in question is basically adjoining another downtown commercial? And I would suspect that we probably wouldn't. That we probably would have rezoned. Speculative, of course. So I think there is a difference there in that on the other property we were discussing, everything was in yellow as a highway commercial or whatever. Whereas this is a mixed use area. So I think it is different. And while I don't condone the way it came to be, I would support the rezoning.
Anyone else?
I would, if I may clarify through the chair, I would just like to be clear about how I'm framing this and that my analysis doesn't consider whether it's currently operating or not, because we have enforcement actions to deal with that. It's my analysis from the planning perspective is simply, does the use fit in this location? Does it have impacts on adjacents? And comparing it to the MDP.
Yep. This is being dealt with as if they applied for this prior to them opening for business.
That's correct.
Yep. Anyone else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. We have a second motion.
Yes.
Oh. I move that the city council schedule the public hearing for bylaw 1992-21 for the April 26, 2021 regular council meeting.
Moved by Councillor Hilgerger. Any discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried.
Along the same topic, may I ask a question? Thank you, Your Worship. And I guess I direct this probably to Sue. Given that we have this particular business operating outside of its current zoning, is there a penalty, a ticket, a fine that can be applied?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen. I think at this point, our only option would be a stop work order, which I don't believe planning and engineering supports right now. I don't know, Andrew might know if there's a specific fine that we could issue, but I think at this point, any action we took would be simply to shut them down because they're acting without proper authority right now. But given that first reading has been approved and the public hearing is going, I think it's just a matter of time. We could potentially send in the fire department and make some early recommendations if we're worried about safety. Andrew, do you know if there's a specific fine other than that?
So actually, I don't know off the top of my head. So we do have enforcement actions that are outlined in the land use bylaw, considering that the applicant right now has been cooperative and they have been willing to go through the rezoning. We haven't stepped up to more strict enforcement at this point, but we do have options. It's correct, the stop order is an option. As far as the city's liabilities, they are aware that they are operating without a permit, which means that, you know, they're liable if something goes wrong. And so we're operating on that basis. If this is refused for some reason, or the development permit gets refused and they continue to operate, then we would certainly ramp up our enforcement options.
I guess the reason I asked the question is because it sort of sets a precedent that as we move forward, and we've already had first reading to change the bylaw, that the onus isn't really on potential business owners to follow our bylaws, unless of course they get caught violating them. And then all of a sudden everybody's scrambling, the council as well as the business owners, because due diligence wasn't done on the first part of the process. I do believe if there is provision to fine this operation, I think we should fine the operation as we move forward. I'm not saying stop work order, I'm saying fine them for setting up shop in an area that they haven't done due diligence on, and leave a message that our bylaws and our land use bylaws and our expectations need to be met by local businesses. And they're subject to a fine if they don't. So I would encourage looking to see what penalties could be applied other than a stop work order.
Andrew, are you pulling those up?
Yeah, so there are options for fines. So I'm just reading this. A person who's found guilty of non-compliance with the land use bylaw is liable to a fine of not more than $10,000. And there is, I believe that like the municipal ticket system does apply to the land use bylaw. So we do have those options too. So that's as far as actually identifying consistent procedures for how we enforce things. That is a project that we as a department are looking at right now because it's not clearly defined in the land use bylaw. And so as a separate project, I think it'd be good to have a policy that is easy to show, you know, in situations like this, that is very easy to show people, this is what will happen if you do start operating or do a development outside of the rules. So that's the short answer is we do have options, but I want to make sure that we're consistent in how we use them. And so we're working on that internally.
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, I wonder if, I know I've been involved with a lot of the fine development that we've done with other bylaws. And I know council typically goes to a warning or tries to go to a warning for the first offense. So I'm wondering if we could take this as an opportunity maybe to do some more public engagement and highlight this in our wrap and warn people a couple of different ways that they need to apply for permits in these situations. And then we've kind of given everybody fair warning, and then we could start you know, going forward with our enforcement or with our fines as we go.
I'd be fine, I guess, with that concept, but I also think that Councillor Bronco's comments earlier are also there. We have some responsibility here. We've obviously issued a license in an area that maybe we shouldn't have issued a license in. So maybe we have some responsibility there as well. So that's fine. I could live with your recommendation just for educational direction and first time warning.
You're good. The three added agenda items, 6A Centennial Park, Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think all of us have been contacted about what's happening or potential happening of Centennial Park. I know that through the business mix and analysis gap that we accepted the report as information, which identified having Centennial Park possibly as redeveloped and declaring as surplus land. What I'm concerned about is the process that happened here. I certainly would have liked us to take I would have liked council to be able to give direction to administration that, yes, we've identified that we are willing to sell this park off and develop commercial property, and then that wasn't done. We were all I won't say surprised, but basically told that the procedure of potentially selling this off. And I don't know how we can, as a council, say or debate whether or not we want to even go forward with this or not. And if that's the case, I guess my question is, how do we debate that to either carry forward or stopping it today? So would a motion need to be brought forward?
No, I think, and maybe Sue, you can correct me if I'm wrong, when administration brought this to council on whether or not we had an appetite for selling that Centennial Park for either commercial or commercial residential, council directed administration to explore what that would look like. And I think that's exactly what they're doing right now. They've offered a survey to the general public. We're getting feedback. Administration is putting together a report back on the information that they've received from individuals through the survey, through contact to administration, and through a petition. So once council gets that information back, then that can be a direction of council to administration to start moving forward on deeming that property surplus, to start the steps forward in selling that, or saying, thank you very much. It maybe isn't the best place to do some development, and we're getting some pushback from the community. I don't think there's any need for direction other than the direction that council's already given administration on exploring whether or not that's feasible for being deemed surplus.
But I don't recall, and maybe I'm wrong, that we gave direction specifically of deeming this surplus property. It was part of the gap analysis, but there was nothing identified directly saying that this was going to be deemed surplus property.
Nobody's deemed it surplus property. We're exploring the opportunity to deem it surplus property. We had directed administration to see if there was an appetite and what that would look like. There's been no motion on the floor to deem that surplus. There's been no direction from council to administration, other than finding out whether or not there's an appetite for selling that piece of property.
But shouldn't, the report was given as information.
But they asked if we wanted for them to explore that possibility, and that's what they're doing right now.
No.
Tyler, sorry.
Go ahead.
If I could just add to, I did have a discussion with Councillor Billingsley about this, and I think one way that we might be able to make things a little bit more clear too is maybe what we do with all of these reports that we're getting is take the recommendations and specifically highlight them, and maybe instead of taking them to COW, because when we take a report to the committee of the whole, we're basically telling council, you gave us direction, you've approved the project, we've done the project, here's the report, and this is what we're going to do moving forward unless there was opposition, in which case we would expect a motion to go to council. So it was our understanding that as we presented all of these options, that council understood we would be moving forward with them. And I think if we can spend some more time highlighting exactly what it is, and at that time, if councillors are not happy with it, they could refer a motion to council and give us a different direction. So not too much different than what we're doing already, but we could just specifically pull out the recommendations and say we're going forward with all of these.
So I get this, at this point, we'll just have to wait for 2 weeks.
Until we get the report back from administration, like from the survey results and all the other pieces of information that we've received. Is that the plan then, Sue, is to come back on the 26th with this report?
Andrew, was it the 26th or the next one? Yeah.
So the plan is to bring all the information that we've collected forward to council, and our request essentially then would be to get council to provide direction on, do we move forward with this or do we not?
And I think too that, council has a policy on public engagement, and we're really trying to make sure that we tap into that with all of the initiatives that we're doing. So we're gathering all the information from the public before we bring it to you. I think it's unfair to ask council to make a decision in a lot of these cases to say, which way do you want to go? You've heard from the community that they want growth. But there's going to be some people that are potentially against, a removal of a park like this. And so I think it's a really important step to get the public feedback. And then when you're making that decision, you're making it, with well over 600 people that have participated at this point.
Go ahead.
I think some of the difficulty is, I guess, the rollout of the discussion. In hindsight is always 2020. But I think part of the difficulty we're facing with at least the number of people who have responded to the survey and through letters and so forth is, in some cases, not clearly enough defined for them to adequately wrestle with the questions being asked. And I think the concept of selling green spaces immediately conjures up notions of horror and panic. And so like I say, hindsight being 2020, might we have rolled it out a little bit differently through further conversations? I think maybe we might have. But the horse is out of the barn. I think we let it run until such time as we can catch it and have the conversation surrounding it. It is what it is. Thank you.
Councilor Bronco.
Thank you. I still, more and more we debate this, more and more confused we get. It's council's decision to make a motion on it, to kill this or not right now. We can either, if we're going to go debate it, let's hear what council has the feeling for this. Because if we don't have the feeling, why are we going to wait till the 22nd to have administration wasting time?
You don't want to hear what 600 people in the community said about the project?
Well, 600, what about the petition we got? Those are the people.
Yeah. Those 600, those people who signed the petition also did the online survey. So why would we not wait for a report from administration? That would be wasting time. If we just went by a petition signed by people in the community and not listening to everybody in the community, why would we have administration go out to try to get information for council to make educated decisions?
How many people signed a petition that are on what you have on the website?
There's over 600 people that have participated in the survey.
On the survey?
Yeah.
So all those 600 are all in favor?
I don't know.
We don't know yet.
That's why.
We have a petition here. How many signed against it?
I don't know. We're getting all of that information back in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's why we're going to wait for 2 weeks.
Councilor Billings.
To Sue through the chair. So with this gap analysis, business mix and gap analysis, did that give administration direction? And anything that was in there then becomes direction to sell off park space or whatever was in all the different things that were in that report? Because to me, that doesn't necessarily say that. And yet, that's what's happened.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, it does. So when we do reports like this and we get back the recommendations, administration goes through them and makes sure, okay, are these things that we can actually achieve? Is it a longer term plan, shorter term plan, that sort of thing? And so when we go through these, we start to make a list of here's the recommendations and here's how we're going to roll them out. So I think when we, recognizing that council is the elected body to speak for the citizens, I think when we commission a report and it comes back with a recommendation, there's a lot of value in us going forward with those recommendations because they're the professionals and they're the ones that are saying this is what we need to do. And then at least getting the public engagement piece done And then I agree with Councillor Nielsen. Maybe we relook at this and say, hey, we could have rolled this out a little bit better to give more information, because I'm seeing a lot of questions that we have answers to. So we could have probably answered those ahead of time. But once we get the public engagement input as per council's policy, then we bring it back to council and say, do you want to move forward or not? I know what you're saying. I mean, we could have come back and said, okay, Centennial Park, go or no go. And my spidey senses are telling me that council would have said, well, we don't know, go to the public and tell us. Like you would have an opinion because half the community is telling you that we need growth. And so it seems like a logical step to take. And so I guess I could have just shortened that answer by saying, yes, when a consultant is hired to give us a professional recommendation, we present it to council saying, this is what we're doing and this is the plan and the recommendations. And at that point, if council has issues with it, they need to bring that up to us. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
I know what you're getting at. And I think, you know, I can speak with the leadership team and see if there's a little bit of a different way that we can present these reports as we're getting them and bringing them to council for input. But yeah, short of that, I think we follow the process. Council has a public engagement policy process in place, and that's kind of the next step. So we get the report, we go to public engagement, we report back to council. If council wants us to reconsider that, then I think we should bring that whole policy back forward, or the process, and maybe align the process with exactly what council's expecting for inputs, for off ramps, for ability for council to have input along the way. I hate not being there because I can't read the room.
Councillor Hillgardner.
Through the chair to Sue. So this Centennial, it's classified as a park. I know it's half of its pavement and stuff. But isn't it that a ruling or a municipal act that green space has to be provided per so much population of a city? So in other words, if we get rid of this, do we have to develop another park for that area?
Through the chair to Councillor Hillgardner, there is a 10% dedication that's owed to the city when development happens. But there's not a specific ratio of land mass that has to be considered park. We do, though, and I think Andrew pointed out through the whole process, is that if we did receive money, if this did go up for sale, then the proceeds from that sale have to go back into parks. And so there is some legislation around what we can do with the money. And that would obviously go to enhance other parks within the city. But there's no specific rule that says you have to have X percentage of your land for parks.
So basically, that Centennial area, if we sell the park, there is no real place in that area to build another park.
No, so Andrew and I have had a couple of discussions about this, and one of the things that Andrew will be bringing forward is his recommendation. So Andrew, I'm going to speak for you. In Andrew's professional opinion, when we have single family dwellings and then commercial, you need some sort of buffer. And so he'll be recommending that there be a multifamily separation between the commercial and the single family. And he's also brought up a really important piece too, that he would want a portion of the land to be dedicated to park for that area. So there's still going to be an amenity in that, on that land, just not as big as what's there. So there will be the buffer, the transitional housing piece, as well as a park piece included, that he would bring forward to council for consideration.
So then if a developer was going to take that area, it'd be up to the developer to remove that berm between the highway and the development. That'd be all the cost. It wouldn't be the city's cost. It'd be the developer's cost?
Correct. So we would put conditions. If an offer came in, we would put conditions around what needs to be done. So meeting engineering standards, they would have to meet Andrew's requirements for whatever zoning and development has to, like a mixed use development, and the dedication of park space, et cetera. So all of that stuff would be a condition.
So then in other words, then though, if you put commercial in that frontage, then would we require a set of traffic lights for that highway going back onto the highway 2A?
We could request a traffic impact analysis.
So this could cost the city a lot of money.
No, if a developer wants to come in, a developer would be responsible for that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nielsen.
For me, the issue, as I said earlier, I think the horse is out of the barn and let it run. But the other part of this is a point that Councillor Billingsley spoke to, and I would hope that we could have a further conversation, not necessarily today, regarding process and understanding the process, because like him, I'm not convinced that, I wasn't aware that by accepting a piece of information as information necessarily constituted direct action without some conversation leading up to that. Because if that's the case, then I could expect out of these recommendations that came out of the gap analysis, all sorts of things unfolding that I read about and I accepted as information that administration has seen as a green light for action. So I'm just hopeful that we can have a conversation to make sure that both council and administration's on the same page as to how do we get from information to a green light action position. Thank you.
Councillor Billingsley.
I'd like to make a motion. I move that City Council directs administration to not continue investigating Centennial Park as surplus at this time.
Moved by Councillor Billingsley. Any discussion?
I move that City Council directs administration to not continue investigating Centennial Park as surplus at this time.
Moved by Councillor Billingsley. Any discussion? I think that as a council who have put a ton of weight and a ton of pressure on our economic development team, on our administration, and heard loud and clear from our community that we don't see any growth, we don't have anybody investing in our community, we're the city in slow motion, we're the city in reverse motion, all of the things that get tied along to it. We spend money on a business mix analysis or the business gap analysis. Administration is then looking for opportunities to grow our community. They don't just bring a motion to council so that we make a decision based on just how we feel, because I wouldn't have thought there would have been that much pushback, and obviously I haven't seen the results of the 600 people responding to the survey, but I've certainly heard through Facebook messages, text messages, emails, phone calls of people who are opposed to the development, but I've also had the same phone calls, texts, emails, Facebook messages of people who are excited at the opportunity that we might have further development going on. After the little bit of pushback we got with the development across from the water tower, and then seeing 5 bays fill up and built in a year, and granted that was a bit of a painful process, but that was us figuring out how we're going to move forward and getting development in our area. I think I think that our administration has done a really good job in identifying a potential piece of land, getting community feedback on whether or not they want to see that developed. I think it would be extremely, I don't know, it would be really unfortunate that if 600 people gave their feedback on whether or not we should sell that piece of land or not for development, to not hear any of their concerns, because as far as you know, all you've heard is from people who live in the area that are opposed to it. Maybe there's the same amount of people that are in favor of it or don't understand the entire development where it would be a mix of commercial and residential, and that there would still be green space available there, and that the money used from the sale of that piece of land would then go to either develop a new park someplace else or further expand or beautify another park in the city where we have other options. So I think killing this right now is not listening to what our residents are having to say. If in 2 weeks it comes back that overwhelmingly people didn't want to see that piece developed, then if the motion is made and nobody supports the motion, nothing happens. But I think that if we kill this right now, with all the time and effort that we've had from our administration to conduct the survey, gather the information, and be preparing it as a report back to council, after we've told them emphatically that we want growth and development in our community, we're giving our administration pretty mixed signals, and we may not see another opportunity coming back from our administration because they have no idea what we want them to do. Councillor Billingsley.
I too want growth, but not at the expense of a park when there is vacant land right across the street, but there is vacant land just down the street. There's vacant land on the south side of town. And I'm just worried that what happens to that green space, eventually a new park would be built. But if there is room for growth, I'd be possibly looking at this being not a bad idea if we didn't have a ton of vacant land. So
the city doesn't have any control over the land across the street. The city doesn't have any control over the land on the south end of town.
no question, right? I agree with that.
So if somebody's now then come to the city, and I don't know if they have or not, but if that's a potential for development,
But,
it's not being sold unless somebody's developing it.
right, but why would they come to us as opposed to the property owners across the street?
No idea. I don't speculate, nor do I develop. So how about we get a report from administration to figure out what the best course of action is going to be, instead of giving direction to our administration saying we want growth, but they bring an option and then we kill it before we even get a report back.
But shouldn't we have had that before we took it this next step?
We did.
No, not,
It's public consultation. There's no motion on the floor. They haven't brought a recommendation to council. We're exploring options on how we can potentially get growth in the city. If it doesn't work out that way, well, it's swing and a miss. We can try with something else.
at the sake of removing a park, no way. Okay,
But then you don't support the motion when it comes forward. Why would you kill a report or information being brought back from administration before you've even heard from anybody in the community?
oh, I've heard from people in the community.
I mean, through the report. You've heard from people in your community and your neighborhood who don't support it. 100%. Councillor Blatz.
So I hear Councillor Billingsley's concerns, especially because, yeah, seeing that petition come forward, it was an eye-opener to me how many people are definitely against the selling of this park. But I also hear what Tyler is saying in the sense that there's over 600 people that completed the survey. The survey's already been out. Administration has already gathered the information. And I think that it would be a poor use of their time if we just kill it before we even hear the information. And as well as that, even if we decide that we don't want to sell Centennial Park, it also gives us the opportunity to talk about ways that we can better maintain that park and make it a better green space. And so I think that no matter what, having that come forward in 2 weeks is a great opportunity to both talk about whether or not we can see that as a potential business venture, or if we see that more as an opportunity to better a green space that might be underutilized.
Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that it's important that, as much as I think it's unfortunate how it rolled out, to me, it's out. And I think we let it unfold with whatever the feedback is that we get from our community. And regardless of what that feedback is, I think it gives us another opportunity, because I'm also hearing, sort of for the first time, what some of the vision is in relation to the park, which we haven't been able to disclose or haven't disclosed necessarily widespread throughout the community. And I think as we get that information and we can talk about the kinds of things that are being expressed here today in terms of, will there be green space there? Won't there be green space there? What kind of development are we looking at? How do we mix the development? Could it go further? Could it go further north to other green spaces along the highway? What could happen about moving it to the other side of the highway, which isn't our property? I think it opens up all sorts of opportunity to have really meaningful dialogue as to what that could look like in a way that could also benefit the community in terms of a really great green space in conjunction with growth in our community. So I'm prepared to see this come through. I do want to have conversation going forward as to interpretation of accepting items as information versus action items, and but I'm prepared to see this through so we can have more meaningful conversation as the data comes out.
Anyone else? Councillor Hilgardner.
Yeah, I'd like to see the process go through. To me, that land is going to be a very expensive piece of land. So with all the stuff that has to be done to make it into a commercial area, let the process run, and let's follow through with it.
Anything else? Motion on the floor, ready for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Defeated.
So I misread.
Councilor Bronco.
Not to the motion, but since we're getting some reports back on the 22nd,
26, yeah.
26th, can we get an appraisal what that land's worth? We must.
Through the chair to Councillor Bronco, that's something that we were planning to work on as part of the surplus land, because the policy that was approved by council insisted that we have outside third party come in. We do know what it's valued at right now through our assessment, but we probably would not invest in that unless directed by council, unless we were prepared to sell it. So if council wants us to step ahead of that process, we would need a motion allowing us to spend those funds ahead of time.
I like to know what the land's worth if we're going to sell it. What?
But we don't.
We don't.
But we don't know if we're selling it.
Right.
Yeah. Just drop it there and let the process.
If at some point council comes back and says, yes, deem it surplus property, at that point, we would go into our surplus property policy, which says that we need to get a third party independent assessor out to give us the value of that property.
I just want to say that I voted the wrong way in the last vote. I said I was going to support the motion, and then
You caught me off guard with your hand up. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's fine.
yeah. So I just want to correct that.
That was a close one, Wayne.
I was wondering what he was doing.
Anything else? Item 6B, temporary patios. I've heard a little bit of feedback from a couple of businesses in the community. I've also reached out to Camrose and Stetler for their temporary patio permit and their application process. They've both waived the fee, and Camrose had one turned around as quickly as 2 hours and 10 minutes or something ridiculous like that. Andrew, has the ability to use Camrose as a template if they want. It's on their website if it's something that we want to do going forward. Given the provincial restrictions on in dining, like inside restaurant dining, but being allowed for patio use, maybe something that we can look at as a council. And I know you spoke a little bit about this, Andrew, earlier, that you were going to bring this up anyways, so.
Yeah, through the chair, I can give a little idea of what we've been thinking internally if you want.
Please, yep.
Because we have, yeah, so we have had a few applications already. And of course, this seems like a really great way to help out businesses and restaurants right now. So I don't think it would be that difficult to implement something probably right away. We have issued a few of these already, varying the existing requirements just because it makes sense for now. And we've made them temporary permits till, I believe, October 30th, just to cover this season.
Or you said you've already issued permits?
Yeah, we have done 2 through the normal process, but we did charge the permit fee for them because we haven't made that amendment yet. But I do agree that I think we could waive the permit fee for that. And I'm sure it's something that we could have as, yeah, like a same day turnover as well. So my recommendation, I guess, would be we probably could do it. I actually don't know procedurally how Camrose did it, but we could bring a land use bylaw amendment to next meeting. But that would mean that the changes actually aren't in effect probably until the end of May. So I'm actually not sure. Maybe there is a better procedural way to go about that.
They've just set it up where it's temporary, obviously through these COVID restrictions. So they're just being more lenient on where a permit, like where a patio would be permitted. I think that if we've got 2 already that have been approved already, my only request would be that if possible, administration could get the permit process done quicker than the 3-week that I've been told that it would take. And then if council wanted to either waive the permit fee or not, that could be a motion following this. And then if you could bring back something to council for the next meeting or whenever you're able to, on if we're changing the permit requirements to be a little bit more lenient on where a patio could be placed. That could be something that we work on moving forward. But if it's a kind of a, if it already meets our patio permit application process, then if we could expedite that, that would be fantastic. And then if we need to make amendments to it so that the ones that aren't meeting the current regulations, that we work around that too.
Yep, we can definitely bring that back to next council meeting for sure. And yes, we will continue to issue them with the current variants. And yeah, now that we have the rules figured out that we're going to vary, it'll be easy to issue them quickly.
Perfect. Councilor Bronco.
Thank you, Tyler. I like the great idea of patio, but I would like to, if possible, because if we can have a design or a sketch where administration feels it's compatible to put these patios outside, because are we interfering with wheelchair accessibility, drainage? If we're going to put a temporary, don't know what side of the road it's going to go. Imagine where the restaurants are, so it'd be by the old Bank of Commerce. I imagine that's probably the best place, but are we interfering with drainage flow? Sometimes you have some monsoon rain and I don't want to see decks floating off the middle of the road. But if we can have just a little diagram where you want to put it, how far into the road it's going to go, so we can get a wheelchair accessibility, because people still want to use the sidewalk.
That's all part of the permit process.
It was done last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would make sure that access is still maintained and things like that. Most of these, I believe, are all the ones we've had so far are just in the parking lot of the actual building. So sidewalks haven't been affected so far. But yeah, we can make sure we outline some of those considerations for next meeting.
Would somebody like to make that motion about bringing information back on a patio? Councillor Blatz? So to the motion on bringing information back on changing the patio permit requirements. Anything to the motion on the floor? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Would somebody like to make a motion on the permit fee? Councillor Blatz?
I move that city council waive fees for temporary patios created due to pandemic restrictions. Does that sound right? Sure. Okay. I move that city council waive fees for temporary patios created during pandemic restrictions or due to pandemic restrictions.
Councillor Billingsley?
Should we possibly change that to have dates as opposed, I mean, when's the pandemic?
What's the pandemic over?
I think if it's due to the pandemic restriction, so the reason that the patio I'm tired of saying that, due to loosening the restrictions on the patio requirements is because there's no in-dining allowed. So in the motion saying due to pandemic restrictions would say that it's whether it's for this summer or if the pandemic carries on for another 10 years, then, or you can say due to pandemic restrictions for 2021. And then if the pandemic goes on for another 10 years, you're not waiving fees for another 9 years after that. Is that your concern or what?
Yeah, exactly. So that, I mean, does this go on forever?
Yep.
Type of
Friendly
thing?
amendment to include 2021?
Yeah.
Yep.
Andrew, if you can get a permit done in under 2 hours and 10 minutes, can you let me know, please?
Yeah, it's on now for sure. It's a race.
Tyler once went for his house.
I got a big open lot next to my house. Now I just need an AGLC license for
Yeah, that's right.
anything else. Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. 6C, notice of motion for next council meeting. Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to give people notice that I will be bringing forward a notice or a motion for next council meeting regarding art committee and the art reserve. And I'll present all that background information at that time. And I'll work with administration over the next couple of weeks to put that piece together.
Perfect. What, I forgot what we had to do for notice of motions. Was it an acceptance or is he just making a statement that it's being done? Do you remember? Do you remember if, is it accepting as a?
I think it's accept as information at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a heads up for administration that a motion's coming, and so we can start working on the background of that.
And you'll work on it with that counselor or that member of council? Okay, good enough.
Correct. Yeah.
Excellent. What are we on now? 7. Need a motion to go in camera. Moved by Counselor Billingsley. Those in favor? Carried. We are now in camera and we're going to take a 9-minute break.
Oh, 9 minutes.
9 minutes. That is slow. I gotta go get remote control start for my dog.
She's that noisy son of a bitch.
It's the old dog.